We met when I was 8, and after some awkward moments, we spent every day together for 10 years. We were a fearsome combination. Then I moved away from home and we went our separate ways, but I've never forgotten those special times together. I'm Katie Derham, and I'm going to find my first love.
Encouraged by her musical mother, broadcaster Katie Derham learnt the violin aged 8, only to give it up after university. In just 4 months' time, Katie will be playing with chamber group the Fidelio Trio in front of 300 people at London's King's Place. But will picking up her childhood instrument bring back painful memories of her mother's untimely death?
She died 7 years ago, and I still feel quite cross about it now, you know?
Here we go.
When she started at 27, Cambridge graduate Katie Derham was ITN's youngest ever newsreader. But working with this kind of pressure every day takes its toll.
John, my husband, always used to say I sometimes could be quite businesslike with him when I got home and still be quite, telling him what the news was in my life that day about dinner and the children.
Do you fear that you and all your efforts...
You have to put on a bit of a mask to read the news. It isn't appropriate to be emotional. As a normal person, you are affected very deeply, but you simply cannot be on screen. So what I find happens is that when you're at home, you can respond in a different way. When 9/11 happened, we were all working around the clock for days, and I remember I finally got an evening off. I think I went to see Moulin Rouge or something, but found myself weeping through that musical, which wasn't really that sad as musicals go. And that was obviously a complete delayed reaction to everything.
Another massive aftershock in Haiti this morning was a frightening reminder of the death and...
Because I had to be pretty buttoned up at work. The ability to express your emotions and feelings through music is a really beneficial one. That's one of the reasons I have been so thrilled to have the chance to play again, because I'd kind of started to forget how good it was to let it all out.
Katie juggles her career with motherhood at her home in Sussex, where she lives with her husband and 2 daughters, and a violin she hasn't touched for 20 years.
Everywhere I've lived, I've always kept it within reach, thinking that this is going to be the time I'd learn how to play it properly again. Well, we've been through an awful lot of pretty ropey school orchestral rehearsals, some very nerve-wracking competitions. It was a huge part of my life. I mean, I wasn't the sportiest of children at school, and music was my thing. It meant a lot to my mum and dad that I was, enjoyed and reasonably good at my music, because that's what they loved as well. I think the violin's a hugely versatile instrument. I think you can make it sound extremely rich, and it can also be very pure, and if you play it badly, it can be very screechy. So it is quite hard, it's quite a challenge to make a nice noise.
Although Katie had been playing from the age of 8, by the time she was 22, she had other priorities.
I played in a concert when I'd just left university and I'd moved down to London. I'd just started to work and I was working shifts, and so I could barely make any of the rehearsals. And so I can't quite believe that I let it go from being something that dominated, or certainly all my spare time, to something that I haven't really done at all since I've been a grown-up. But life got in the way, And then suddenly, here we are 20 years later and 2 lovely children and a busy job, but no violin playing. This isn't just going to teach me how to play the violin again, this adventure, but it's also doing a job that my dad's been trying to get me to do for 20 years, which is to sort out the box of music in his loft. First violin, book 3, grades 4 and 5. And loads of pieces in here with my teacher, Mrs. Fletcher's very distinctive handwriting. She was my violin teacher all the way through school, and is now my stepmother, but that's a whole other story. Relearn slowly, for vibrato underlined in capitals.
As presenter on Classic FM, Radio 3 and the Proms, Katie feels she also has something to prove to herself.
I spent the last few years getting quite involved in classical music broadcasting, and there's been a little bit of me that has felt a bit of a fraud because I haven't actually been a proper musician myself. So if I can kind of get my skills back up a bit, then it will make me feel slightly more worthy of talking on a level with these really talented musicians that I do come across these days. It's about being part of this chamber group, and I think that's what's going to be brilliant and hopefully really enjoyable, but also really challenging, because it's about working with these other people who are fabulously talented and professional, and I don't know how I'm going to do that, and it is really quite intimidating, really, quite scary.
It's November, and on the way to her first mentor session with the Fidelio Trio's violinist Dara Morgan, Katie's feeling understandably nervous.
It's 20 years. I mean, it is 20 years since I've played properly. And even then, it wasn't that good, I'm hoping that I can
remember enough and make a decent enough sound to not just make him run for the hills. I am just feeling a little bit apprehensive that I've bitten off more than I can chew.
As well as playing with the Fidelio trio, Katie's mentor Dara has worked with Paul McCartney, David Bowie, and is currently collaborating with Philip Glass.
Hello.
Good morning.
I'm Katie. Hello, very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I love your fiddle case.
Dara's asked Katie to bring along a piece she feels comfortable playing so he can assess her standard.
Maybe up to just the double bar. Enjoy it.
Yes, I'm feeling very relaxed right now, Dara. Really relaxed. Okay.
No pressure.
Yeah. I'm in the wrong. Yeah, I was on the G string for that.
Started on the G
yeah.
string, yeah.
I'm not sure if I was, you know. Hold on. I think I was slightly praying for a miracle. So out of tune. I thought it was, yeah, a bit awful, actually. I felt a bit embarrassed.
What I think we need to look at immediately is posture.
Okay. No.
Because
I need brutal honesty.
it's all about physical awareness. The violin is probably the most tension-based instrument out there. Your neck is like this. So,
As Katie hasn't played for 20 years, she needs to get to know her violin again.
Put the violin out in front of you, straight, good. So you can see your scroll, yeah? So if you turn it, see the end pin, roughly come in at 90 degrees. This here, we're not going to move this at all, it just stays central. Let's think of it as, yeah. So that already looks more natural. I have slightly less rings on than you.
Sorry, I didn't really...
Well,
see, that's how out of practice I am.
You're not free here. But I would like to give you some suggestions of how to hold the bow. At the minute, hers is a little clenched. This is our speaking voice. And if you have a very flexible and free one, then there's a lot of possibilities. Rounded, like this. Rounded, and then on top.
It's a completely different feeling, Derek.
Sorry.
No. It is going to take a bit of getting used to, though.
Look at my arm. If I turn it the way you are, what am I immediately
Yeah,
doing?
well, you're not freeing this up, are you?
You can actually see the tension. Look what you've done immediately.
Bent it again, yeah.
Yeah. Little bad habits are going to be creeping in, I think, again, unless she actually does kind of really slow, methodical practice and starts being aware of all the technical stuff.
With some basics out of the way, Dara moves on to the piece Katie and the Fidelio trio will be playing on the big night.
So here we are, Mozart Sonata in D. They're commonly now known as the church sonatas. You're going to come and play with us in King's Place as part of the London Chamber Music Society, a very established old series in London that's been running for over 100 years.
The Fidelio trio, made up of violin, piano and cello, perform internationally, have an impressive recording catalogue and have worked with composers including Michael Nyman and Howard Skempton. No wonder Katie's looking worried.
It's actually the trio's debut in the series as well, so don't mess up. Because we're all under pressure.
I'm feeling so comfortable suddenly. No.
Whilst Katie has a break to get over the shock, Dara plays a recording of their Mozart Sonata in D major.
So, yeah, you said
Quite a stately pace, that, isn't it?
Yeah, Mozart exposes all of our faults. Because he is so refined, you can hear every little error. She's going to have to really clean up the corners. You know, the great thing about all of these pieces by Mozart, or any of his chamber music, you always hear the operas. Even if it's in a kind of minute version. This is 3 bars from Marriage of Figaro or Così or something. For me, this recording already is beginning to drag. It's not a funeral.
Yeah.
You know, so I would aim for a slightly more spirited, faster.
Dara wants to start putting the theory into practice.
There are 2 violin parts, and I thought what would be worth trying is you playing the first violin part.
But going through the piece reveals gaps in Katie's violin technique caused by her 20 years of not playing, most fundamentally hitting the right notes.
You right?
Yay.
And when Dara plays some of the more technically challenging parts of the piece, Katie starts to worry.
Something like that. Yeah?
I feel like I've got a huge amount to learn in order to get anywhere close to being good enough.
I would love to be in a place where it can be a real performance and not just us playing through a piece with her. And that's where I'm not sure yet how far we'll get.
A couple of weeks later, the tables are turned in the Derham household as Katie does her violin practice in front of her daughters Natasha and Eleanor.
I'd like to say I was practicing every day. I haven't been able to do that quite. I've been doing about 4 times a week, an hour at a time. About-ish. Why do I suddenly feel as if I'm actually back at school right now? I'm getting really impatient because I kind of thought, oh, well, if I just sit down and have a bit of a go, I'll be able to play this quite well, quite quickly, and I just can't. There's some bits I'm just finding really difficult to master. The trills here aren't particularly difficult trills. I mean, they're not in a weird position or anything. It's just my fingers are so out of practice. They're not sounding very good. These semiquavers, they just need to be really even, and they're going across 2 strings, and they're fast. If you were doing it slowly, it'd be... And it's meant to be about 4 times as fast as that, and I just find myself suddenly going, rather than going backwards and forwards.
Katie's husband John can see the tension rising in his high-achieving wife.
Katie does get frustrated when she is letting herself, but more importantly, letting others down. And she's a massive team player.
I'd forgotten how hard it was to make every note sound nice, to make it sound tuneful, and I think I'm getting about 1 note in 3 sounding halfway decent at the moment, so that's quite a long way still to go. I'm getting very stiff up here when I'm playing as well. I must do some exercises or something. There must be stuff I can do to stop that happening. Yeah, it was going all right then. I seem to remember Dara saying, oh, I'm sure, you know, you'll have it note perfect by the time I next see you. And I'm just thinking, oh, man. I'm not sure it's going to be that very good at all.
Coming up, Katie feels out of her depth as she plays with the trio for the first time.
There's nothing like a bit of fear to motivate you to do some more practice.
And on a trip back home reveals the tragic story of the driving force behind her violin playing.
The worst thing by far that's happened to me in my life was my mum getting Alzheimer's.